which naturally occurs due to the interaction of the modes. There are three kinds of annihilations. It's very powerful, it'll start, okay. There are three kinds of annihilations due to eternal time. Thank you. The material elements and the quality of one's work. I'll repeat the translation again. There are 9 kinds of different creations beside the one which naturally occurs to the interactions of the modes. There are 3 kinds of annihilation due to eternal time, material elements and the quality of one's work. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The scheduled creations and annihilations take place in terms of the Supreme Will. There are other creations due to the interactions of material elements which take place by the intelligence of Brahma. Later these will be more explicitly explained. At present, only preliminary information is given. The 3 kinds of annihilations are: 1. Due to the scheduled time of the annihilation of the entire universe. 2. Due to a fire which emanates from the mouth of Ananta. And 3. Due to one's qualitative actions and reactions. Om Agnati Mirandasya Jananjaya Jananjana Salakaya Chaksu Unvitamyana Tasme Shri Guruve Namaha Sugame Parimendasya Skalapate Gati Mahu Swakri Payustu Danena Santu Santu Avalambanam. So we are continuing on, but what is happening here, I'll just recap the last 4 slokas just very quickly. We've been hearing many times about the 10 different types of subject matter that is given in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and of course the first one is Sarga. We've all heard that word before, Sarga, meaning the creation. Of course the second one is Visarga, to do with Lord Brahma, the creation of the secondary elements. So the good news, or it's all good news, but the good news is that Vidura is asking the last question of Maitreya with regards to this whole business of Sarga. And what is he asking? He's asking, what is the time element? Please explain something to me about how the time element functions. And Srila Prabhupada's purport here more or less coincides with the original one about 4 or 5 slokas ago, where he explains in text 10 in his purport, very similar, the complete universe manifestation of the entities beginning from the atoms to the gigantic universe itself. There is a time for annihilation of the body. There is time for atomic dissolution, a time for universal dissolution, and there is a time for the annihilation of the body of the human being, and there is a time for the annihilation of the universal body. So, explain the Vidura wanted to know in detail the different physical manifestations of time of annihilations. So here we have 3 annihilations. The scheduled time of annihilation of the universe. So we've discussed that. That is really discussed very succinctly in the 12th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's really quite amazing description. And then the fire which emanates from the mouth of Ananta, and then qualitative actions and reactions of the human. So first of all, we would like Vidura, he's posing what is eternal time. So what do the materialists think what time really is? So they're rather bewildered by the time element. Materialists think that they can use time to expand their sense gratification, right? Thinking of it in terms of future, where you can get a job, save up your nest egg, buy a house and get a family and enjoy. Or that's for the future, or if the future's already gone, they can dwell upon their past achievements and reach satisfaction in their mind that they've made the best use of a bad bargain, which is namely the body. Sometimes time, well, the other aspect of time is it can be applied in relative motion. So people like to challenge time in the measurements of speed, how fast they can go in the water, to break the 1 minute barrier for 100 metres or something swimming, or how fast they can go in their motor cars, or Formula One, or in their jet planes. And then they have the rocket ships. But this is where they sort of reach the full extent of the time element. They just seem to be limited because their rocket ships can't really go beyond the solar system and reach those galaxies far, far away that they dream about, that are full of so much opulence and whatever, because they're unable to do so. So relatively, they start to think of time as a dimension. So, I mean, when I was at school one day, they said, "What is time?" They asked me. I wasn't paying attention. "What is time?" I go, "Oh, it's fourth dimension." "Yes, correct, very good." But actually, well, they're thinking that someone with an Einstein-like brain is going to come along and solve this problem of travel, and they'll be able to go warp speed through time and travel the whole universe. So that is the concept of time from the point of view of the materialist. So Vidura is posing this question to Maitreya, a very serious question. What is time? And if we've been here for the second canto, the Srimad Bhagavatam, the previous canto, time is described, according to Vedic cosmology, as being an element. In fact, it is the 25th element of material nature. Anybody know what the 26th one is? So it's just a bit of a trick question. No trick question. It's described as super soul. So that's described in the second canto. So that time is the element which is the principle. It binds all the energy of all the other material elements, all the senses, the three modes of material nature, all the basic elements, earth, air, fire, water. It relates to all of them. It is the factor which actually, in the material world, which is subject due to the influence of time. But what is really interesting is that time, although it binds each element, but the elements can interact separate to time. Just like, for example, if we have material nature, we look at material nature, we see that there is abundance in spring. So all the birds and the animals, they give birth to all their offspring because there is an abundance, because spring is producing lots of fruits and grains and berries and what have you. So there is a correlation there. But it's not necessarily due to time, it's due to the interaction of material energy and the living entities. And of course, when winter comes, we have some animals that like to store things away, like the squirrels. They store their nuts away because they know that winter is coming. So that's just one example of how that interaction happens. But the unchangeable factor about time is that every living entity is subject to that principle of birth, growth, maturity, dwindling, and death. So, as it is said, that one thing that is certain in this material world is that the death rate is 100%. We've got 1,000% death rate here. Doesn't matter. 100.000. So that is the time element in the material world. But in the spiritual world, this the working of time in this manner doesn't exist. Or Krishna Kirtan always corrects me, he likes to put it that time is there in the spiritual world, but it is noticeable by its absence. Srila Prabhupada explains it very nicely in the purport. He said that he compares time to like a recording, like on a tape recorder. You record a voice on the tape recorder, but it's not the actual person. So this is Krishna's energy, that the time element is here, put here in this material world to make things go around, to make things happen. So it is like the complete whole in this material universe. In the spiritual world, there is no time because everybody is absorbed in the present. There's no repeated birth, old age, disease or death. There's eternality, that's all. So there's eternality, then there's just complete presence. Of course, time can be used by Yogamaya, who is the orchestrator of all the pastimes for Krishna. So, as she did in the material world, but in the spiritual world, she can have daytime and nighttime there, just to facilitate Krishna's pastimes. Or when Krishna came to this material world and brought the spiritual world Vrindavan with him, Yogamaya had the ability to change the seasons. She could make all the seasons happen at once for Krishna's pleasure. So therefore she can do these things, but it is purely to enhance Krishna's pastimes. So there is no annihilation in the spiritual world like we have in the material world. So here now Maitreya is explaining the process of annihilation in different formats. So the ultimate annihilation, I won't dwell on this for too long because I want to just dwell on the third one. The process, the ultimate annihilation is, as is described in Canto 12, just a complete dissolution of this universe, where actually we know that the universe has come as golden bubbles, and then all the interaction between Devi Shakti Mahamaya and Lord Vishnu, that there is a agitation of the pradhana and all the mahatattva, all the elements are formed around the universe, and then everything else happens. And then the reverse happens also, that Rudra is there and all these expansions just burn up the universe, and it floods with water, and then all the elements dissolve into each other and they go back in the body of Vishnu with all living entities. And the pradhana once again remains this pradhana, just all this sort of cloudy, dusty elements until the next creation. And as was described yesterday by Maharaj, this happens time and time again. It's just like a constantly revolving event that happens. So then there's another dissolution, where at the end of Manu's reign there is partial devastation going up to the top planets, and this is where we get Visarga, the secondary explanation of the creation with this material universe. So we have stories about all the different expansions of Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this particular case, now in the case of our Manu, who was Satyavrata Muni in the last millennium, he was rescued by an avatar, an incarnation of Lord Krishna by the name of Matsya. Hello? Oh, okay. So we know this a beautiful story of Matsya in the 8th canto, where where there was this tiny little fish which caught the attention of Satyavrata Muni. He said, "Oh, this little pond is too small for me. Put me in a bigger pond. And then puts him in a bigger pond, and then he starts to outgrow the bigger pond. Can you put me in a river? And then he starts to, this fish starts to outgrow the river, and somehow or other by his potency, Satyavratamuni puts him in the sea, and then the waters of devastation begin, and this fish grows and grows and grows until it's how big? Money? Tell us, please. 8 million miles long. So the universe becomes like a fishbowl, right? And then the incarnation, of course, it's Matsya tells Satyavratamuni to attach his boat to the horn of the fish, and he keeps him afloat throughout the waters of devastation. And so when the waters finally subside, he's the next Manu, and he becomes Vaivashvata Manu. Story's a little bit similar to the Bible. Noah, you read about it, there's some similarities there. So that's Visarga, that's different pastimes. So there are so many dealings by which we can understand the nature of great personalities, and we can learn from that nature. So in this third dissolution, which is the 14, Prabhupada describes, due to one's qualitative actions and reactions. So this is a personal devastation of our body. So to understand that a little bit better, we have a very, very wonderful story in the 4th canto, which isn't too far away. It's about 6 months away, and it's a rather elaborate story about one of Lord Brahma's descendants by the name of King Pratibhani, right? So he was the ruler of the world. He was a great king. He had some really, really famous sons. Anybody know the name of the sons? Prachetas, the 10 Prachetas. They were great sages meditating under the water for just their purpose was to actually generate living entities into this universe, because it was just a very early the universe was at early stages. And we have a whole, where Lord Shiva discovered the Prachetas and he gave them instructions. We have a whole chapter to look forward to in the 4th canto, prayers by Lord Shiva for the benefit of the Prachetas. So that was good, but while the Prachetas were away, King Pratibhani, he rather become influenced by the modes of material energy, and as his position as king, he become pretty attached to material energy. So to enhance his attachments and his penchant for sense gratification, he began to perform all these different sacrifices according to the Vedas, and there's a lot of animal sacrifices. Of course, the Vedas are split into different sections: mode of passion, mode of ignorance, mode of goodness, and there are so many different sacrifices that could be performed for the enhancement of one's material enjoyment in Svargaloka, and here on this material planet. So he was doing that, and Narad Muni saw that he was noticing in his travels that King Pratibhani, he was going a bit too far. So he decided to instruct him. So he came to him and he said, "What are you doing?" And King Pratibhani, he said, "Well, look, I have become rather attached. I'm realising that my attachments are getting the best of me. Could you please instruct me how I can become detached from what I'm doing and correct my ways?" So Narad Muni, being very, very diplomatic, sometimes he gave him a story about this one king called King Paranjana. You all read the story of King Paranjana? Oh, it's so good. It's about 4 chapters on King Paranjana. I can't go into it too much because it's in the next canto. It'll take forever, but there's one very important piece there that I want to discuss in relationship to destruction of the body. So King Paranjana was an allegorical story. It was actually all about King Prachibhani. But, you know, allegorical stories mean that you do a parallel story and the person gets sucked into the story, and then at the end of the story goes, oh, wow, that relates to me, you know, so that's a good story. So then, of course, Narad Muni, just in brief, began to describe the activities of King Paranjana, how King Paranjana was a great king, and he had a great friend called Avidya, who was actually representative of the soul within the body. And he was without a home, so he was very frustrated. He was wandering here and there and there, and he came to the Himalayas and he found this beautiful city with 9 gates in all different directions. And that city of 9 gates was the body, right? So he moved into the city, and it describes all the different pavements and parks and everything, and it all relates to the hairs within the body and the eyelashes and the hair and all the different organs and everything. It was a really elaborate description. It goes on for a couple of chapters, and the king is very, very comfortable in his city of 9 gates. And then it goes, each gate has a certain purpose. So the gate was like 2 gates relate to the nose, 2 gates relate to the eyes, the other gates, 2 gates to the ears, 1 gate to the rectum, 1 gate to the genitals, and 1 gate to the mouth. So one gate he went out to, he found this really, really beautiful lady who was surrounded by all her assistants, 10 assistants, which was related to the 10 senses, and this big snake, which was related to the life airs. And immediately they fell in love, and he asked her to become his queen, so she moved into his city, and life was perfect for him. So Narad Muni describes how he went through the city and he enjoyed so much within the city, enjoyed his princess, but he had this urge to go out through one of these gates, and he started wantedly killing all these animals, and then after he satisfied his lust, he'd go back to his queen, who was mortified that she'd left him, but they'd make up, and as a result of that, they had thousands and thousands of children. They had 10,000 sons and 11,000 sons and 110 daughters, to be precise. And then he arranged for marriages for all his sons and his daughters, and they all had grandsons, and the city kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and swelling out. And in fact, it became so big it became overcrowded. And all the sons and daughters started to plunder the treasury of the king. So what happens when the king's treasury is plundered? He starts to tax the citizens even more. So after a period of time, King Paranjana was starting to become unpopular, and he realised that the snake that was protecting him was starting to waver and get a little bit tired. So this is where Narad Muni leaves the story there, and he goes into another story about his own personal experience, where a couple of personalities approached him, and one personality that approached him was Jara. So we know what Jara means. That's old age, right? So this lady in the form of Jara became very attracted to Narad Muni, and she asked him, "Can I please become your wife?" Now, no one wants Jara as their wife, because she represents old age and invalidity. So Narada said, no thanks, I'd just like to travel around on the brahmachari. And because he was pure, he was able to reject her. And she became very, very upset with him and cursed him. Narada saying in Srimad Bhagavatam, I got cursed. She cursed me that I couldn't stay one place for one day. I had to travel all the time. So then she says, well, what am I going to do? I'm looking for a husband. Find me a husband. So Narada put her in the direction of this other prince whose name was Yavana, or actually Baya. So Baya means fear. So she went and approached Baya, and Baya's function is to instill fear into all the living entities in the material world so they can wake up to themselves and their own mortality. So he's thinking, I can use this Jara, because actually Jara is so good that when old age and invalidity comes along, then people become fearful naturally anyway. So this is the process of material nature, that birth, old age, disease and death. So old age is Jara, disease is Vyadi, is one of the companions of Jara, and then there's Baya. So then he said, I'm not going to marry you, but you can become my sister. And so then those two united, and he had a brother, and the brother was called Visarga. So this is the relevant point here in this sloka, that the eternal time destroys also the living entity according to the quality of one's work. So Visarga is that point in time where it's a temperature that the body reaches at 107 degrees, that's a fever. And when the body becomes feverish at 107 degrees, it's like a fire, and then the soul is forced from the body. So these three together. So Narada Muni goes, are we okay? So that's that story. The three characters, Jara, Yavana, or his name's Baya, and we have Visarga, who is that fever at 107, right? So Narada goes back to the story. He said that in the meantime, while King Puranjana was trying to enjoy taxing the citizens, and still things were starting to sort of fall apart, the gates were in need of maintenance. That's all his different senses. There was a Gandharva called Chandrika who had 360 assistants. That's all the days and the nights. And he saw that this Puranjan was start to weaken, and he began to attack the city. And then the snake reared up, that's the life heirs, and start to fight this Chandrika. And Chandrika had all his assistants, and his assistants were Jara, Vyadi, Visarga, and they began to plunder all the gates of the city, and one by one all the gates start to fall apart. And then all of a sudden the snake, which is the life heirs, became very, very tired, and they came right inside the city. They captured King Puranjana, booted him out of the city, and the snake wanted to leave the city, but it couldn't because they tied the snake up, and they burnt the city, and the city got put on fire. So that relates to death. So the body, when it goes to fire, when it reaches that feverish temperature of 107 degrees, then the life heirs leave the body. So the snake was captured. Why was it captured? Because actually it had to be judged according to its qualitative actions and reactions, and once again birth took place. So that was the process, and the story continues on. So Narada Muni spun that story to King Pratibhani. He said, by the qualities of your work and your attachment, this is where you get your reactions, he said, because you've been killing so many animals, these animals are waiting for you to die, and then they are going to pierce you with their sharp horns and bite you with their teeth, and you are going to get the reaction from the killing of all these animals. So it was a very beautiful allegorical story. So I just thought I'd mention that aspect of Visarga, that that fire that comes within the body and destroys the body. That is what we experience birth after birth, and it's called samsara. So it's about all I could put together in a short space of time. But if you actually want to do some reading, it starts at chapter 25 about the story of King Puranjana, and it is rather a beautiful story, very scary for the human beings, for us beings, but it is there in this canto, chapter 26. So, anybody have any questions or comments? Yes?
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the class. I have a question regarding the presence of time in the spiritual world. You mentioned that KK had said that you feel the presence, or I mean the opposite. Like
the time is there, time is present by its absence. Yeah.
And my question is, I don't know where I read or heard this, but that time in the spiritual world is a organizatorial element, like to organize, to schedule things, because it's like, you know, when you do deity worship, there are like two important things, and one of them are punctuality.
Yeah.
So things are done in certain rhythm and certain times. So that, please correct me, and that's my question. But in my understanding, the time factor is very present in the sense that everything is very organized, but it's not. It doesn't have the destructive feature as in this world.
Okay, so two things from that. Yeah. So the thing about the absence of time is that we're all in the present. Time is relative in the fact that we're just about to have breakfast in the future and in the past, and that is to sustain us in the material world. And according to the three modes, we can eat breakfast in the mode of passion, goodness and ignorance, so it's all interrelated. But in the spiritual world, time is just there as a servant of Krishna. So the important ingredient in your question is Yoga Maya. So it's very nice if you ever take a pilgrimage to Vrindavan. You've been to Vrindavan a number of occasions. Have you been to Vrindakund? So Dinabandhu Prabhu, who comes here regularly, he's been reviving Vrindakund. It's a lovely, lovely place just outside of Vrindavan where you can relax. So Vrinda, she is the personality of Yoga Maya. So every day she organises what is going to happen. So through Yoga Maya, through Vrinda, she says, okay, today we're going to this kunja here and everybody's going to be white. So the gopis will be wearing white skirts, the trees are going to be having white blooms, there's going to be white birds singing, and Radharani's going to be white and Krishna's going to be black. Like that. This is according to the, structure and organisation of Yoga Maya. So she organises everything. So in the spiritual world, the same thing is going on, that everything is organised. And it's through the potency of Yoga Maya, who's the servant of Krishna. So she's the eternal consort of Krishna, just in the same way as Radharani, and she's an expansion of Radharani there to serve a certain function. That is a very poignant point. It's actually quite amazing that someone was, I think Radhanath Maharaj was pointing this out the other week. He said that Radharani, because all the gopis are expansions of Radharani, there was this one certain pastime about Mukta Charita, about the pearl pastime. So you all know the pearl pastime where Krishna, just very quickly, Krishna saw that the Radharanis, that the gopis had all these lovely pearls, and he just walked past. He said, "Oh, can I have a couple of pearls just to decorate my favourite cows?" And the gopis just ignored him, said, "No, you don't deserve these pearls. These are for us. We're all lovely. We just want to decorate ourselves with these pearls." And Chandramukhi gave him a broken pearl like that, just to add insult to injury. He said, "Right, I'm going to fix these gopis." So he went to his mother. He said, "Mother, give me all the pearls you have." "Why, Krishna?" Because I'm going to plant them and I'm going to grow pearl trees. So they did that, and he grew all these beautiful pearl trees, better than any pearls that anybody ever seen. And then the gopis are going past and they see these pearl trees, so they want to do the same thing. And of course they got all their pearls, all the pearls they could find. They said, "We're going to outdo Krishna." They planted all their pearls and they've watered them with milk and tilled the soil and everything. And what did they get? Pure brambles, that they just got thorns and bushes. That didn't happen. And so of course Krishna's the only one that's got all the pearls. And the gopis started to get worried because they took all their parents' pearls, and they're going to know that the parents are going to find out what happened to the pearls, and they're going to be in big trouble. So they had to make a conciliation with Krishna and do some negotiation. And Krishna was a really difficult negotiator. And so each gopi had come up and they tried to negotiate. He said, "Yeah, sure, have as many pearls as you like, come here and we'll negotiate." And his terms were rather, how shall I put it, very, it was amorous, on an amorous base, and his love for the gopis, he expressed his love for the gopis on the spiritual platform. And the gopis, sometimes, they were rather shocked by it. And every time a gopi was couldn't say anything, she was rather, mute and couldn't reply. Radharani replied behind the bush. Radharani didn't even come to negotiate. She replied something to herself behind the bush, and the gopi would repeat it. And they're going, "How is this? Radharani's hiding there." She'd say something and the gopi would repeat it. And Maharaj made the point that actually all these gopis are expansion of Radharani, so automatically they know what to say because Radharani is there. So this is how the spiritual world works, that actually Radharani is the orchestrator of everything for Krishna in the spiritual world. And so Yoga Maya is one of the principles whereby her job is to make sure that all the pastimes, like you say, are regulated and everything is going on nicely. Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you for the class. You were talking about the allegorical story about King Puranjana and the city of 9 gates and our body, and how the bodies over time is just dwindling. And we also heard that in Mahabharata, the Yakshas asking King Yudhishthira, "What's the most amazing thing?" And his answer was that we see our grandparents and everyone dying, but we think we're not going to die. And even for us as aspiring practitioners of Bhakti Yoga, we hear it often, we hear it all the time, but we still don't feel that urgency or that, I guess speaking for myself, that complacency and not seeing that every moment shouldn't be wasted. Can you give some tips again of how we can...
It's very difficult when we're in these bodies. That Prabhupada used to say to us, "Don't think that you're not going to be old like me," because we're all in our 20s, 23, 24, we're sitting there in the prime of our youth. And he said, don't think that you're not going to get old either. So we are going through this process where it's very difficult for us to understand. There is one very important prayer by King Kulashekara. Said, Krishna Tvadiya Padapankaja Punjarantam Madhyeva Vinatu Me Manasaraja Hamsa Pranapradaya Sama Kapapite Navataramakarod Bhuvanam Smaranam Kataste. Said, my dear Lord, let the swan of my mind immediately dive towards your lotus feet while I still am in this young body, because when I am old and my voice is all choked up and I'm making the sound called, I'm trying to speak, and that is all coming out of my mouth, how am I going to be able to remember you? Famous prayer. So this is maybe, if we want to be reminded, maybe we should chant the prayer of King Kulashekar and just remind ourselves that sooner or later Jara's going to tap us on the shoulder, say, hello, can I become your friend? And if we're feeling all right, no, not right now, I'm still doing pretty good, thank you. And then we sort of get up and we stumble and our back hurts and everything like that. Jara comes along and says, I'd like you to meet my friend VRD too, disease. And then you're in, you know, and then the fear takes place. That's the whole essence of a human existence, that we have these agents, Jara Vyadi, towards the end of our life. Then we are reminded of our mortality and we think of Krishna then. But at that point in time, the fear factor comes too. So we have the Bhaya, the Yavana. So the fear factor sometimes actually bewilders our brain. So it is better to, before we do that, that we actually meditate solely and wholly on Krishna's lotus feet, and then we'll be able to have clear conscience and presence of mind to be able to go back to Krishna's abode, time of death. Jai. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much.